The Gauteng Social Development Department has slashed the budget for social welfare services by a staggering 216 million rand. As you'd imagine, this is going to have massive negative impacts for vulnerable people. Let's bring into the conversation researcher at the Wits Southern Centre for Inequality Studies. It's Vetten. Haven't spoken to you in a while, Lisa. Good to have you back on eNCA with us. It's an awful amount of money. Just give me a sense of the impact this is going to have. I understand we can get down into the minutiae of this, but just a broad stroke, if you can, when you're talking about hundreds of millions of rands being taken out the system.
The cut is actually bigger, Gareth. It's 316 million rand in services. But when we look at the money that goes to NGOs to provide those social care services to children and families and vulnerable groups more broadly, it amounts to 417 million. So what the department funds 2.3 billion to NGOs. They've redirected that money away from social welfare services and children and families to a program they call development and research. So the impact we're seeing is that many organizations have found their budget slashed by 61%. So a social worker, for example, who was earning 14,500 rand at the end of April, now finds she's going to take home 5,600 rand per month. A child care worker who was earning 2,900 rand will now be taking home 1,200 rand per month. But those organizations are lucky. At least they're getting 39% of their budget. Many others have had their services terminated altogether. They will be closing doors at the end of April. We've been monitoring this most closely with organizations that provide services to people with disabilities. And we're seeing that what that's going to mean is that people will lose services, and sometimes they will actually lose living facilities where they're currently living. So it means services and organizations lost and shut. All people's salaries radically reduced with no preparation. Some organizations still don't know their fate, and they must pay staff on the 25th. Today is the 21st. They still don't know what money they're receiving from the department.
It does beg, I imagine, a fairly wide-ranging answer, but there's an obvious question here, Lisa. Why? Why is this amount of money being cut suddenly?
Because essentially, when Premier Lesofie became the new Premier, he reprioritised what he saw as the priorities for Gauteng. And with that, he then instructed clearly other government departments to follow those priorities. So DSD has followed that, and in prioritising what he sees as the priorities, such as townships, informal settlements and hospitals, and poverty, they've taken this money away in order to prioritise that. But the effect of it is to deprioritise things like services to children and services to people with disabilities and to older persons. So this money is going to things, so the kinds of programs that the budget vote says the money will be going to is things like waste recycling, sewing school uniforms, packing dignity packs, setting up cooperatives. So that's what the Premier is seeing as a much bigger priority than services to older persons and to children. So yes, they will still have some services, but they'll definitely not be the priority that they used to be, which is a real problem, because if you shift that amount of money, then who are you saying should be responsible for these groups of people? They have rights in terms of Section 27 of the Constitution. They've just lost them. Who is going to fill the gap?
I was about to ask you, surely this must be getting very close to the line of impacting on basic human rights, like right to dignity, right to housing, right to food, right to protection. I mean, I can keep going on, Lisa. You'll know more about this than I will. But I imagine we're skirting very close to violating basic human rights. And I wonder, though, if you were to help me take this conversation forward. You mentioned Panyaza Lesofie, but I can't help imagine but the Department of Social Development would have been involved in some sort of discussion here. How do you have a premier of a province making a decision that's going to have such a big impact on a department like social development? How do you think social development lost this particular argument? I imagine, I'd like to believe, they would have fought against this.
Well, I wouldn't be too sure of that. There are certainly people within the department who, off the record, will express their grave concern about what's going on, but there are many who, I think, do see things like waste management projects that may perhaps generate a very tiny income for a few people as being more important. So I think it also reflects internal divisions within what people think the purpose of social development is. So social development, I mean, the Premier sets, in terms of the way the budget is divided, the Premier sets the political priorities. So other departments will more or less have to follow suit. So social development, well, from what we hear, they're obviously towing the political line here. So, as I said, we've heard those who are trying to do what they can. But there are many who think that this is long overdue, unfortunately.
I'll leave this as a last question to you, Lisa, if you don't mind. I imagine then the next obvious step, and we see this time and time again, is various NGOs, NPOs hauling both the Premier, the province and social development off to court. I imagine that's the only possible view of remedy at this point.
That's correct, and the process has already begun. It began about 2 weeks ago, and it will be looking at those questions of rights that you raised, as well as questions around the right to administrative justice and the right to the consultation.
Lisa, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Very, very worrying when you hear just how bad it can be from someone like Lisa Vetten, who's been around for a very long time. She understands the impact on the ground, not just us throwing around hundreds of millions in the media. She understands the real impact. Lisa Vetten, thank you very much, as always, for your time. From the Wits Centre for Inequality Studies this morning, I'm sure we'll have a lot of reaction to that welfare budget being slashed.